You are now listening to Diamond in the Desert podcast, hosted by content creator Roshocker and former Dbacks pitcher Trevor McKenna.
Welcome back, everyone, to Diamond in the Desert, episode 3. We are your hosts, Roshocker, with former Dbacks pitcher Trevor McKenna, and we have a lot in store for you today. It's going to be a little different vibe, and I'm ready for it. What about you, Trevor?
Yeah, we got some exciting stuff on deck, guys. Got some insight to off-season, what to expect while guys are getting back ready for spring training and how they get ready for the season.
And speaking of the season, we are 27 days away from opening day. And shout out to number 27, Andrew Sawfrank. Awesome pitcher for the Diamondbacks. We cannot wait to see him in the lineup. And make sure to download the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever else you listen to podcasts on. Now, our spotlight today, the Dbacks Spotlight, is getting ready for the regular season. And I love that we have you here because you have a lot of insight. And, this is something that you can really share with everyone at home because we might just, think about people just reporting to camp. But there's a lot that takes place between once that last game is over with until, spring training. And so physically getting ready for spring training, how does that work?
Well, it's really interesting. First of all, the season is a absolute mental toll, right? You're playing 162 games. You're playing in more games in the postseason. So you want to, at first, take some time off, right? When baseball season over, like, for example, the Diamondbacks, when the World Series was over, they took some time. You're looking at probably 3 to 6 weeks off, maybe sometimes more for those pitchers and hitters, just to get that mental break and that physical break, obviously, as well. But obviously, when you're getting into about November, December, pitchers are just going to start touching the baseball again. They want to play catch. They just want to slowly start getting into things. And hitters are just kind of, hitting off the tees, just really getting into the speed of it all again, just making sure that they feel loose and getting ready. It's not until we really get to January time is when pitchers are getting a little bit more serious. They're doing their flat ground bullpens, and then they're jumping on the mound to throw a few bullpens as well, kind of that late January, early February. And then those hitters are going to be starting jumping in the cage. They want to start seeing that ball in, feeling it off the bat. And again, that'll be, and live ABs as well, like late January, early February.
So kind of get a little bit more in depth with it, as far as for you being a pitcher, when you're working out, are you working out with other pitchers on the team? Maybe, you have some friends that are on different teams that you guys get together like, hey, I'm going to be here. Is there a certain facility that you go to that you're comfortable with? How does all of that work during the off season?
Yeah. So for example, 2019, I was getting ready for my first spring training. And I was actually using a local high school facility, actually pitching against those guys just to get some live looks. Also working out with some fellow pitchers. And then you get really in touch with everybody again when you get back to Arizona and you're getting ready with everyone. But, it's really solo for the most part. You really want to get back into your own mind, figure things out, see how things feel, and really recover on your own as well. And then you want to start getting in touch with other players, maybe other teams, and starting to do, a little bit more of back-to-back training where, you're going against other batters or, obviously those hitters going against other pitchers.
Now, pitchers report to spring training as early as February 13th, while hitters report to spring training as early as February 18th. Now, for the viewers and listeners out there, why is there a difference between, the pitchers returning earlier than the hitters?
Yeah, so it's always pitchers and catchers first. They want to build that relationship. They want to have those 5 days before hitters come on. Pitchers are going to take a little bit more time during spring training. It's a lot more stress, obviously, on the arm to get ready. And then hitters will come on so that way they can start doing those live ABs. But they want to make sure that those pitchers and catchers can get at least 2 bullpens in, get that relationship going first, have those meetings, and then bring the hitters in right after that.
Now, do you guys also have a lot of media things to do, as far as taking pictures? Is that really kind of, taxing as well, trying to get everything in at one time?
They do a pretty good job of kind of keeping the media, in the beginning at least, kind of at low. But as the spring training goes on, you're going to see more and more people. It could be a lot because, again, you're away from baseball for potentially 4 or 5 months to get into the role of things again. can seem a little bit overwhelming at first, but then you kind of get used to it again.
Now, spring training hits, and everyone
Mm-hmm.
knows that there's, backfield mini games, bullpens being thrown on the side, hitters taking hacks during live ABs, but most fans don't know what players are doing beyond the field. Could you
Mm-hmm.
share some of your experiences with that?
Yeah, so throughout high school ball, throughout Division I baseball, never really did anything besides hitting the weight room and making sure I was focusing on my nutrition, right? Nothing else really beyond that. Then got to professional baseball and was presented something called mental performance coaching. That was huge. I didn't really know what it was at first. I thought it was kind of like therapy, didn't really understand what was going on, but it's more about sports psychology. Zach Brandon, my mental performance coach, he's actually the head of men's performance and coaching development with the Dbacks currently. Great mental performance coach. And it's all about making sure as athletes, we train the one muscle that a lot of people forget about, and that's the brain, right? Making sure that we're getting, ready for spring training, number one, but more importantly, mentally getting ready for that grind of that, regular season of those 162 games.
And that can be really tough. And I'm glad that, with further development of just studying, different things as far as mentals and stuff like that, that they have these different coaches that will help coach you throughout the season. Because if you think about it, 162 games, like you said, 5 to 6 months away from your family, you're with your team that whole time. That can be really, really tough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it could be super taxing, man. And I had two great mental performance coaches, Zach Brandon and Daniel Bard. Yes, you guys did hear that correctly, Daniel Bard. I was a little starstruck when I first met him, to be super honest. I grew up a Yankees fan, so they were always playing the Red Sox. So I knew Daniel Bard very well because he threw 100 miles an hour plus and would always get us
Yes.
out. So, no, he was a great pitcher, but even a better mental performance coach. And not sure you guys know that story. He actually made a comeback to the MLB with the Rockies back in the 2020 season. He never played professional baseball since 2013 up to that 2020 season. He was dealing with this arm injury that he completely lost touch of his fingers to the baseball. It was insane. And it was so cool to watch because as he's training these athletes through mental performance, he started to realize, hey, my fear of jumping back into baseball is not warranted anymore. I can do it. Like, as long as I can feel that baseball, let's do it. And I'll never forget the first day I saw him throw on a side field with a catcher. He was smiling ear to ear, man. He was pumped. And then I saw him in 2020. He was slinging it at 100. It's amazing. You could take off 7 years and then get right back on the horse. It's amazing.
That is insane. And, a story that you really don't see happen too often. And thank you to the advancement of technology to be able to help with the mentals and get you physically ready to be able to, take that long time off and then be able to
Mhm.
come back. And he's up here pitching like he did before. That is amazing.
It really is. And when talking with him, he devoted all of that in his comeback to two main things, which is something called guided breathing exercises and guided visualization. So, number one, guided breathing exercises, it sounds simple. You're breathing. How hard could that possibly be? When your adrenaline is high and your heart is pumping while, whether it's a spring training game or in season in a, high adrenaline situation, you sometimes forget to breathe to calm yourself down, right? How to breathe in certain situations, how to breathe correctly during workouts, how to breathe correctly when coming off the mountain. It's time to relax, right? Just be able to understand your breaths, and then also how they can help your performance is really, really important. And then as for the visualization, that was actually my favorite. What visualization is all about is getting into a quiet room for 10 or 15 minutes and basically visualizing yourself in a third person view in a high adrenaline situation, whether you're at the plate, got to score that guy from third, or you're in a big pitching situation. And you, almost like a recorder, you constantly see yourself succeed in that moment, and you have all your senses going. You smell the peanuts, you hear the crowd, you feel the dirt under your cleats, you feel the pine tar on your bat. And what happens is, as you continuously do that over and over and over again, when that time comes in real life, it feels like deja vu. And it's like, okay, you know what? I've been in this moment before. I succeeded and I can just react versus having to think about what my next steps are. So love visualization, a big believer in that, big time.
Now, you shared a story with me that I'm going to go ahead and read to everyone, which I really find it fascinating. It's 2018, and it's your first year as a professional baseball player in the D-backs organization. Bottom of the ninth in Hillsboro, Oregon, and you guys are up 1 run. The other team gets the bases loaded, and a big-time lefty steps up to the plate with 2 outs and the winning runner on second base. The bullpen phone rings, and it says, "This is Trevor's hitter. Let's go win a ball game." The bullpen door opens. Your heart is pounding. Adrenaline is at an all-time high. Monster by Skillet explodes on the stadium speakers, and the crowd goes insane as you jog through center field towards the mound. Manager Sean Roof hands you the ball and gives you a punch to the chest and tells you to go get him. You go to throw your warm-up pitches while all the fans are going crazy and getting hyped for the duel between pitcher and hitter. Hitter steps in, and instantly you're dialed in. Everything feels like slow motion. Breaths begin to calm, and a crowd, still loud noise, goes completely silent. You would go on to get the hitter into a 1-2 count. One more strike, and it's game over. Still experiencing the silence and focus, you begin to feel 5,000 fans stomping feet in the stands, start vibrating the mound under your feet. You take one step off the mound to gather your emotions and thoughts and think to yourself, you have worked so hard for this exact moment. You are ready for this. Take this moment in. You will remember it for the rest of your life. Step back into the mound, get the pitch call, come set, deliver a changeup low and away to the hitter. Hitter swings right through the pitch. The silence immediately stops and the stadium erupts. Hops win, hops win. That is just a great visual for what you go through on the mound. And, we as fans don't really get to experience that because we're amongst the ones making a loud noise. And for you to dial in and just silence everything around you is amazing.
Yeah, man, that still gives me goosebumps to this day. Remembering that feeling, right? And it's so funny because I always get the question from fans when I was playing ball and from family members, hey, that famous movie For the Love of the Game with Billy Chappell when he throws that perfect game for the Tigers. He used to say something every inning called "engage the mechanism," where all that silence just happens out of nowhere. The crowd's going crazy, but all of a sudden it's complete silence and he just sees a glove. Does that really happen? And guys, that really happens. When you get that dialed in and you believe in all the work that you put in the off season and spring training, you can just silence everything out and you're prepared for that moment. You're controlling your breath and you're just ready to go. It's the coolest feeling ever.
Yo, that is awesome, man. My question for you now is, coaches prepare you to get ready for those moments. Is there any preparation that the coaches themselves get for, to, be able to help you guys out?
Yeah, so those same exact coaches are going through their own mental development, their own mental performance coaching. It could be taxing on them as well. Like they have to prepare lineups. They have to do all this analysis of the pitcher before the game. They have to get everybody situated on the field correctly. It could be taxing, right? So getting themselves mentally prepared for the season as well is super important, not to mention that they have to get mentally prepared to get you prepared, right? So they have a lot on their plate themselves. And that's why they do mental performance coaching. It's super important for them as well.
That is really awesome just to hear, everything. And, it gives me a fan a different vision of what it all takes to get ready for the regular season. A long grind. It's not just physically, but it's a lot of mentals as well. You're going to an opposing stadium, 40,000 at the major league level plus. And you're hearing different types of things that are being shouted your way. When you're in the outfield, for an example, and you have the fans behind you yelling your name and trying to get you, to take your focus away from your job, it makes sense that you guys have these type of coaches to get your mentals ready.
Definitely, man. And there was two slogans that I always live by is number one, control the controllables, control what you can control. And number two, try to learn to be comfortable in uncomfortable situations. Like you just mentioned, traveling, let's say you are a team in Arizona, you got to go play a team in New York. You're not sleeping in your bed. You're going to be getting yelled at by fans in the stands when you're coming on the field or coming out from the bullpen. So there's always that pressure. So you want to try to get yourself comfortable in those uncomfortable situations as much as you can.
Now, outside of the game, when you're kind of like, walking around the dugout, you get the fans that are standing there waiting for autographs and different things like that. What type of approach do you take when it comes to that?
I actually love talking to them. In the bullpen, I always talk to fans. It's actually super relaxing for me. I have a great story. So we played the Vancouver Canadians, which is the Toronto Blue Jays affiliate, with my time with the Hops. And of course, the visitors' bullpen is something right next to the beer garden. Everybody's sipping alcohol and having fun. And the great stories I have with what people were saying to us. It's humorous, it's fun, keeps the game light, and you have a lot of fun with it.
I know a lot of people kind of have an anxiety when it comes to talking with people outside of their team and different things like that. But that's real cool to see that, you're engaging with them and the fans are there to, whether they're rooting for you or rooting against you, they're there to be able to have an experience. And a lot of times, the visiting, players that are there at that stadium can give a fan a certain experience of where, you know what, this guy is really, really cool. I'm gonna start paying more attention to him and, seeing where his story ends up. So I think that's really cool that, you're real awesome with the fans.
Exactly, man. I mean, listen, I was a kid that was 5 or 6 or 7 years old at one time. I was that fan, and I had those players come up to me that changed my life forever. That I fell in love with the game of baseball, right? So there's multiple times where I was either a visiting player or a home player, and I would play catch with a kid in one of the stands. Like we would play over the fence just to give them that experience and give them that love of the game that hopefully that they will remember for the rest of their lives.
That is awesome. And for everyone out there, make sure to download the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever else you listen to podcasts on. We are going to jump in. We had one game in between our podcast episodes, and it was a pretty interesting game. Low scoring game. The D-backs played against the Giants. And again, we saw a great pitching performance from the Diamondbacks. We had Ryan Nelson, someone that, you've talked about before. 3 innings pitched, 5 strikeouts, only gave up 1 run, and it was a home run. And it's funny because they asked him about the home run and how can you prepare, for that batter. And he's all like, I will try to remember not to throw him a 2-1 lazy fastball down the middle. What'd you think about his pitcher performance?
I think that goes like it's so funny. I think that goes back to his mental performance coaching because he's keeping everything so light. He's not trying to be too serious, right? He pitched very well and he made one mistake. That's what mental performance coaching is all about. Hey, I'm going to fail sometimes on the baseball field. I understand that. I have to swallow that fact and just make it fun, make it light. He looked dominant. I mean, 5 strikeouts in 3 innings. I mean, obviously he did very well, right? Again, his off speed was doing really well. And he kept that fastball up in the zone, which they just couldn't touch.
Yeah, I heard him. He got a lot of whiffs from the fastball. The fastball got up to 97 miles per hour. So that is really good to see. Another guy that had a pretty good game was Jake McCarthy. He hit a hard double to left center, later scored on a Giants error. Really, really good. And they only needed the 2 runs that they got early on to end up winning that game 2-1. What did you think about offensively Jake McCarthy and anybody else that you saw on the D-backs roster?
Jake's always a solid hitter. I saw it from day one, and it's actually pretty funny. I had dinner with some friends, and they're actually direct friends with Jake McCarthy and his girl. So I was like, what a small world. We were talking about the podcast. He's doing really well. He's really happy, but I'm just glad to see that he's performing. What I saw in the minor leagues. Now he's really bringing it to the major league stage. I love to see it.
Nah, that is awesome. A couple of other guys that had some good performances. Humberto Castellanos, we've been talking about him. Another 2 innings, 2 strikeouts, no earned runs. And Jose Castillo pitched an inning and got 3 strikeouts. So the Diamondbacks pitchers they came mentally and physically ready for this spring.
Yeah, man. I mean, and that's all about mental preparation. They controlled their off season. They got ready what they had to do physically. They came in, they were working with their mental performance coaches and getting ready for these moments, right? Again, spring training is still light. They're working on certain pitches, but they want to start getting mentally prepared for those situations when they're a little bit more high adrenaline when it gets in season. So I'm glad to see that they're succeeding now, and it's going to push them forward into that, the season.
Exactly. Now, today being Friday, the D-backs play a late game against the Cincinnati Reds. Saturday, the Diamondbacks will be facing the Angels. And Sunday, the D-backs will be at home facing the Brewers. So if any of you guys are out there want to catch some spring training games, that is the schedule for the rest of the week. Now, we got our Diamondbacks Mail Bag. And Mr. Outlaw from Arizona asked this question, early prediction. Who do you have winning the National League West this year? Now, we have the Giants, the Dodgers, the Padres, Diamondbacks, and Rockies. Who do you have, Trevor?
Oof, that's a really good question. I'm going to say because the Dodgers spent so much money, I'm going to give the West to them. Obviously, the Diamondbacks are going to make the postseason still, even though not winning that West. So I'm going to say the Dodgers. I think they spent enough money, and they better have a return on investment or not a good business move.
Exactly. I'm looking at all the teams, and the Rockies, they had a really tough year. I expect them to be a little better, but still, they didn't really make any big roster moves that was eye-catching for me. The Padres, I felt like lost a lot of talent, lost more than what they brought in. So I actually would have them around fourth. The Giants made some moves. They've made some pretty good moves. We've seen some players already looked really good in spring. I don't think they have enough to pass up the Diamondbacks, so I got them third. And then we got the Diamondbacks and the Dodgers. And again, I agree with you. You spend $1 billion. $1 billion.
Uh-huh.
You got to win the West, right? It's like, there's no way you spend that much money and, your team is not good. So the Diamondbacks, They made it to the World Series last year. They made some great roster moves, and I expect them to be fighting their way. I think they'll make it to the wild card. I'm gonna give the West to the Dodgers, but when the playoffs come, anything goes.
Exactly, man. Anybody can beat anybody on any given day. That's the beautiful part about baseball. That's why I love it.
Exactly. And that is episode 3 of Diamond in the Desert podcast. Again, you can find this on Apple, Spotify, or wherever else you listen to podcasts on. I am your host, Roshocker, with my guy, Trevor McKenna, and we will see you guys later.
Thank you for listening to Diamond in the Desert podcast.